Well, hello again, everyone. Hope you had a nice break, nice coffee, cup of tea. This presentation session I've been looking forward to for some time. Simon Ray from Rubikx, not the cube, but there you go. That's a very terrible joke. Is now going to join me on stage, hopefully, Simon, and he's going to present to you. Here he is! Yay! Hi, Simon.
Hi.
Right, Simon, I'm going to butt out and let you introduce this and take over. So, best of luck and everyone enjoy.
No pressure then. Thank you very much, Dave. Thanks for the quick intro there. And I was just enjoying a nice picture of Gary's posh chair there. That looks very regal, Gary. Very impressed. Very impressed. Let me show my diligence with technology and try and share the right part of my screen. Perfect. Okay, so working really well. So when I first suggested this presentation title, I got quite a bit of feedback from the organizer. Well, it's a little, so we expanded it a wee bit, but effectively, what I wanted to do is wanted to make some comparisons to certain other markets as we go through. So just to give you a little bit of background for those of you who haven't met me, been in social housing all my working life, some 23 years. Worked for some of the big providers, worked independently as a consultant, and now for the last 10 years or so written and provided software, bolt-on software in the social housing sector. So I wanted to sort of have part of my presentation where we talk through some of how the market is and what's happened in the past and all the rest of it. And then I want to talk about a new project we've been working on, so we're going to launch that today. And we'll be making a little appeal at the end of it. So let's make a start. Hopefully the technology is going to work well for us. And I want to start by talking about the link through to Tesco. So Tesco, the products you see on the screen there are all for sale on Tesco. So Tesco.com, you go and you can get your antifreeze, you can get your Redx. If you're young, you won't know what Redx is. Deionized water for your batteries. You can get yourself a set of wiper blades. But you can't get your car serviced. Paul on the deli counter might be able to give you a hand with your, picking out the engine from your 1976 Austin Allegro because he sort of once had one of them once. But Tesco don't do it. Tesco don't do car services, and they don't do it because they know what they're good at. They know they're good at shipping stuff. They're good at getting stuff in, putting it on the shelves, and shipping it out. They're not interested in doing the extra bit. Okay, and I'm going to draw some comparisons a little bit later on. But for now, I want to leave that in your minds, and I want to move on to the next little slide. So the next little slide is about the housing market. So the way the housing market is, we have the big six. We have the big six providers here, recently condensed from potentially big seven. We have the big six providers here, and we have the alternative market. And what I loved about the Uncon when I first started talking to the guys about coming to the Unconvention was the fact that it was all about the alternative market. It was all about the bolt-on providers and the sort of the innovative digital techs of the world that really sort of we fit in well with, because we're sort of that extra, that afterthought, that thing that fills the gap in that big system potentially, and they've been alternatively referred to as best of breed products or specific products. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the barriers, and we've seen these themes come up a little bit over the last few presentations and in the questionings and stuff. So I wanted to be a little bit more open and honest, because I think a lot of us know what the answers are to some of these questions, and we're quite nice about it and we're quite sort of polite about it. But if we're honest, some of the barriers to market for great new tech, some fantastic new tech out there, are integration. If you look at the barriers to market, getting your product integrated into one of the core housing systems is a huge issue, and when we ask those questions, providers say, well, we're talking to X provider, we're talking to a number of providers, now I'm going to put a little caveat out there, probably to cover a lot of my presentation. I'm going to tell you that this doesn't apply to every scenario of supplier and customer, right? There are great products out there. All of the big six will be able to give you examples of fantastic implementations at fantastically happy customers. So I'm not going to be talking about all of the products and all of the suppliers and all of the customer relationships, but we will have some common themes here, and there will be things that you recognize here in the presentation about your business. So integration is one of those. And actually, I was drawing a comparison with a friend of mine earlier over the chat, whereby we were talking about presentations and how a lot of the new providers say, oh, well, we're talking to a lot of the big providers about, well, yeah, you're talking about APIs, you're talking about integration, but it tends to just be talk. You know, there's not a lot of APIs out there, and actually, it shouldn't be a long conversation. It should be in the modern world, it should be, well, actually, yeah, that integration's there, that integration's available, we can do that. Here's our standard suite of APIs. Philly boots, off you go. But actually, it's more like trying to play skip rope, but there's only one person holding one end of the rope. Because if the other end stays on the ground, nobody's going to be able to skip. Same principle. You can't integrate if one side is super modern, super trendy, has a full suite of APIs, and the other side is talking about email and some CSVs here, there, and everywhere. Okay, sounds old-fashioned, but absolutely, I've heard that in the last 2 months. I've heard a multi-million pound company tell me, oh, well, yeah, we can email a CSV for that on a schedule. Doesn't make sense, okay? The other barrier there is cost. So where there are APIs, often you'll find some providers say, well, yeah, we can give you a suite of APIs. Let me do you a quote for that. And that quote is in the tens of thousands of pounds to integrate to something because it's either non-standard or they just want that. Because they have a buy one approach. A lot of the providers now have a buy one approach. So if you want to buy something, say, well, you could, but actually, by the time you pay for our APIs, it's cheaper to just buy our module, and it's fully integrated. Fully integrated. You should buy our module. It's fully integrated. It's true of a lot of those providers. Some of them will partner, some of them won't, but it's true of a lot of providers. And what I see a lot of, and I would say at least half of the providers are guilty of this, you have a cycle of sell, fail, sorry, promise, keep, sell. Now, what I mean by that is they will sell you a module and promise the world and promise it will do this. And if it's a non-core module, if it's payment source processing or care plan management or something like that, it will likely fail because it's a half-hearted attempt at something that they're not particularly good at. It's not their core business. It is the car service for Tesco's. They're not good at it and they just don't offer it. And if you went to the Tesco management and said, you're great at selling me all of these car things, will you come and service my car? They say, no, it's not what we do. But actually, if they did, they'd probably fail it. They're not set up to do that, okay? So you have the fail, then you have the sorry phase of that project where you go, yeah, we're really sorry. We'll have the account manager in, we'll give them a roasting, they'll apologize and say they're really sorry, they promise to make it better. And you move on to the bunch of promises where they say, well, we'll do better in the future. We'll give you some money back. We'll do this. We'll give you some free consultancy or whatever. We'll make it better. A lot of promises, okay? Then you have this really bizarre phenomenon. If I know some of the attendees at the Uncon are not sort of in the market too long, so you'll find this surprising. But what you do have is you have this keep sort of phase, what I've called the keep phase, whereby a module that you've bought and has failed to implement and has this oh, sorry, yeah, we didn't do a very good job on that. Yeah, we'll hold our hands up. The customer can, in many cases, end up keeping that module. So, but you know what, we'll keep it because we might go back to it, or we'll give it to somebody as a project. And they end up with this sort of loop of non-core modules that are under maintenance. So they're paying maintenance for modules that never got implemented, never went live, and they've had sitting on their license pack for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and they're paying 20% annual maintenance for all that time because, oh, well, we might get back to that, we might go back to that. And it's crackers. It's absolutely crackers. And it wouldn't happen in many other markets. Maybe NHS, maybe local government, but you know what? Not many. And it's certainly not very Tesco. You won't find Tesco paying for anything they don't have to pay for. Okay. So that's the model that I see a lot of when I move from customer to customer. And as a provider of third-party tech, we have portal tech that we can sit over many different systems. We have integration tech. We've had to write some of our own integrations because they're just not available, okay? And that's really challenging. We're now talking to other organizations about jumping on and piggybacking onto our integrated tech so that they can then use it. This is crazy. This is an absolutely crazy situation. So that's the housing market, and that's the sort of my view of some of the world. I want to take you through a timeline of how we got to that and sort of where we were and where we might be going. Okay, so let's start with the past because chronological order and all that. So 1980s, late 1980s, green screen heaven. And if any of you have been in the market long enough, they'll remember the rent clerks who would sit there punching in their green screens, who could whiz through their rents in record time because they didn't have to worry about mice and things like that. Green screen heaven was sort of where I entered the market in my early 20s, where I looked after a housing association, and they had a rent system that was green screen. They actually had a Windows version of a repair system completely separate, not integrated, which was not unusual at the time. And then sort of late 80s, 1990s, you have the rise of the giants. You have the what became some of the big providers now. Some of them didn't survive, some of them merged, some of them got bought out, but you had the sort of the rise of the giants during that time. So this was a great time, and I had friends that worked as salesmen in some of the housing management system providers, and they were buying big, crazy, huge houses because of the sort of money they were getting in terms of commission. And fair play to them. That's what they're there to do. They're selling. But you had organizations saying, do you know what? We're not going to look at any customers under 1,500 units. They're just too small for us. We're too busy. Which seems very bizarre to us now, but at the time that was actually absolutely a thing. And then during the sort of later 90s and the 2000s and early 2010s, even, you've got sort of this cash cow scenario where they're just sort of farming that market, and people are moving system, and I don't like this, I'll move system, and the costs were just astronomically huge. But this was before sort of welfare reform. This was before a lot of the value for money initiatives of the last few years. So this was a great time to be alive if you were supplying housing management systems, and anybody in the market long enough will remember it. I know there are some people there that I could name in the audience that were around at the time and did very well about it. So fair play to you. It was also the past was we went through things like dial-up internet. I remember dial-up internet, and the introduction of email into businesses and all that sort of stuff. And even pop-up blockers were a thing. So the past was, the past was an interesting time to be alive in social housing particularly. However, let's look at the present. Let's look at what's going on at the minute, because we have very few, in terms of the market, there are very few net new logos available. Very few people are shifting housing management system, okay? There's a lot of people reinvesting. That's because of cost, that's because of welfare reform, it's because of a fairly settled market. So despite some of the failings of of some of the software out there, they have very good core systems, very good core modules. So the movement in the market is far less than it was at any time I can remember in my time. So revenue for these big organizations has to be farmed from existing clients. So they have to farm their existing client base, and the only way to do that is to increase prices, bring out new modules. Okay, so there's been a lot of these things come out, a lot of these new modules come out over the last few years that are what I would call non-core modules. They've been brought out, and we've seen the loop that I described before. I've seen a big boom in that loop that I described before, of buying it, complaining, hearing an apology, but then keeping it, and it's not unusual for new heads of IT to look through existing license agreements and say, well, hang on a minute, we've not got that, we've not got, oh yeah, we're keeping it for a little while. Okay, let's look at some of the tech that we're sort of looking at in day-to-day life. So outside of the house market, you've got things like Apple Watches and smart homes. Everyone's looking at channel shift, your credit cards and your banks are moving you into new channels. Even your self-scan, so you can go to Sainsbury's and use the self-scan unit. You can go to Asda and use your own mobile phone, which is even cleverer. I just had to smile when that happened, because that's so much cheaper for Asda and so much better for us. So we have, tech's becoming a part of everyday life, and particularly, as a few people have said on presentations now, that jump's been huge. Parents getting onto Zooms and Facebooks and all the rest of it, just because that's a necessity now, And we have a core software market of software that was largely built in the 80s. If we look at the housing software that we're looking at the moment, a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that was built in the early 80s. And it's being, you've got providers trying to shoehorn that software onto the web, you know, so they're buying third-party products that'll scrape it and screen scrape it onto the web. And this happened back in the days when we moved from character-based systems to, you know, Windows-based systems. You had some really early entrants that were really poorly scraped onto the system, or they've got a workflow engine that's web-based that'll sort of scrape the data together and push it and move it around the system, you know, and that's not a real, you know, web-based system. That's not a true web-based system. That is just sort of a poor approximation. And I was working with an organization who showed me a new product, their big new thing recently. I said, this is great. We want you to get involved with this. We want you to be aware of this. We want you to work with this system. And it was awful. It was all web-based, allegedly. And it was awful. It was clearly designed to just lift an existing system and stick it on a window in a web and then stick a few things around it. And actually your working space was the middle 50% of your screen. And the rest was sort of floating around things that didn't really do anything. But actually your operational capacity was reduced to 50% of your screen in a window. It was appalling. And then we have the product interaction part, and I'm going to move on to this in detail a little bit later on. But this is what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, if you approach an organization and they're sort of confused about what integration you want, and they're saying things to you like, oh yeah, we can do you a CSV loader, or, you know, we can do a flat file integration, or we can, oh yeah, we know about those JSON API things. Yeah, we totally do all them. They're great. Let's talk about them. You know, this shouldn't be a conversation. This should be standard. We've got presentations over the last 2 days where people are coming to this convention and saying, yeah, we have a full open suite of APIs. We can work with people. We have a full open suite of APIs. Very few housing system providers can say that. Some can, absolutely some can. Please don't think that I'm saying nobody does APIs and nobody does them well. But the vast majority of transactions for social housing systems are a closed market. You can't get in there. It's a big barrier to getting in. Moving on towards the future, and I want to talk about sort of some of the most futuristic present that I could find examples of. And I want to talk about Barcelona. If you've ever been to Barcelona, absolutely fascinating city. Barcelona is considered a smart city, and these were 3 stats I could gather about Barcelona. I thought, you know what, that's a really relevant thing. So this is current tech. It's in place. Sensors for parking. There's a revenue saving there, 50 million a year. I think that's in euros, although I couldn't actually quite get it from the article. Lightning, 37 million euros a year, I think they've saved in smart lighting. You know, and when you think about it, it makes total sense. We're lighting up streets that are empty for hours and hours at a time. And same with water, because obviously water is an expensive commodity. I'm up in the north today, and we have plenty of water if anybody would like any. It's falling from the sky in abundance, but they've saved 58 million pounds a year on water because gardens know when they're dry rather than just watering them on a cycle. Sensors tell them when we're dry, and it goes back to some of the great stuff that the guys at Switchy were talking about, you know, about how doing something in a smart way can save you so much money. Okay, and we should be looking at this. We should be working with this already in the housing market. So let's look at the future. Let's talk about the future for the housing market. And we need to look at tenants' expectations and tenants' demands, because one of the dangers is we look at a piece of smart tech, say, oh, that is super smart tech, that is amazing smart tech. But actually, do the tenants want it? Will they work with it? Will it go down well? Will we get the savings that we want? And actually, it's really nice to hear from the guys at XBM that said, you know what? You don't have to take our word for it. Try it. Try it. We'll do you a free trial. We'll do your money back guarantee. We'll do your free trial. You know, and that was really refreshing. When do you hear that from a provider? You know, that they can say, it's so good, we'll let you try it. We'll let you try it. We'll put our money where our mouth is. And that was great to see. And I'd love to see more of that in the market. Outside of housing, I want to sort of make some comparisons as well as Tesco. Some of the other potential topics of my conversation, sort of my presentation, made it in here. So you've got Starling, Uber, and Just Eat that I wanted to sort of give a little nod to. Starling Bank, I'm a huge fan of Starling Bank. Moved all my banking to Starling after 20 odd years with one of the main banks. It was great. It took me about 6 minutes to sitting in this very chair to set up my Starling account. Not only was it set up, it was done and it was ready to take transactions within 6 minutes. They'd validated me, they'd checked my IDs, they'd done a security video, they'd sent me all of my bits and pieces. That was all good. The only thing I had to wait 24 hours for a card, but actually I could put it onto my Apple Watch and onto my phone and onto my Apple Pay straight away. Absolutely fine, because they had all that integration there. You know, you've got to give kudos to the likes of Uber and Just Eat. because through technology, they've become some of the biggest in their market without actually having anything. You know, Uber, biggest taxi company in the world with no cars, Just Eat. You know, how many meals do they serve, and they haven't got a single kitchen? It's crackers. It's crackers to think that that exists, and that those opportunities exist for tech startups to become so huge so quickly. And I'd love to see some of that in the market that we work in. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the 30 billion devices. You know, we've talked about some of the types of tech here. So we've got, you know, connected devices that are smart. We have pressure sensing shoes. What that sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. Grocery deliveries, and this I had to put this in because I was at a client down in Milton Keynes, and they were talking about their lunch order and said if they ordered it nice and early, it got put into, and I don't, you can Google this or you can see it on YouTube. There are these little sort of robots that move around, they're like tiny smart cars, I suppose, and they get shopping deliveries and stuff in them, and they just go automated to somebody's door. Absolutely fascinating. Automated grocery deliveries, absolutely fantastic. Cavity detecting toothbrushes, you know, traffic cameras to auto adjust stoplights so that they can control the flow of traffic around a city. You know, and cars that tell the dealership what the faults are, and the dealership ring you and said, you know, your car's told us we've got a fault with, you know, we've got a fault, and when you bring it in, we need to do this to it, do that to it. These are great examples of smart connected devices, and actually in social housing, we should be looking at this tech and say, well, how can we apply this to make our lives easier, our tenants' lives safer, our financial security stronger. All of these things are possible with that sort of device and that sort of tech going on. So that's really, really a key message that has come through from the Uncon. But these things have been around a while. These things have seen real savings, but we haven't seen them in social housing. And in the earlier speech, it was alluded to that we are behind. We're behind the curve. We've always been behind the curve. And one of the barriers to being behind the curve is integration and availability. You know, we need to make sure that when great suppliers come on board with great ideas and you know, really sort of unconventional things, you know, turning things on the head. Great example, if you're around this afternoon, absolutely pay great attention to the guys at Plentific who have turned around the whole notion of contractor selection, you know, of picking contractors for a job. Now, it's part of that question of why do we do that? Why do we do something in a particular way? And oh, well, we've always done it that way, and that's how we pick a contractor and all the rest of it. Well, actually, the guys at Plentific are saying, well, actually, you could do it another way. You could do it another way. Same with the guy, you know, same with the other presentations that we've seen. You know, why are we sending somebody out? Why can't we, you know, use augmented reality to help us with that? Why are we, you know, why are we waiting for a tenant to report a fault? Why can't the gas boiler tell us it's broken? Why can't the damp meter tell us that the property's got ventilation issues? All of these things have been available for a while, and we're not doing them. Okay, we're not doing them. And it's not a lack of money. The sector is ready, willing, and able to invest in this sort of tech. So there are barriers there. And we absolutely need to overcome those barriers. Okay. So how do we fix it? Well, time for a change. So what we've decided to do is we've decided to build a new HMS. And we've been working on this for just under 12 months now. And we've built the core of our HMS. We're now ready to work with a group of partners to design the end user experience. Okay, we want to look at the enhanced functionality. We want to work with people who ask why. We want to work with people who say why are we doing these things? You know, why do we do it in a particular way? Why can't we work with these other parties and other organizations? And the last comment I've put on that slide there is we're going to shake the market at its core. Now I can hear the squidgy sound of all your eyes rolling right now. Go, oh, it's another HMS. Oh, it'll be the same as the rest of them. Oh, you'll never get any. Oh, I can hear it all now. All the groans are coming through the mics. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to demonstrate how it's going to be different. Okay, how we're going to show a different way of working. Okay, so our system, cloud-based from scratch. So everything we do is cloud-based. Everything was written from scratch, and everything we do is our IP. All developed in the UK and all developed in. I'm hearing noises on my Uncon. I don't know what that is. I'm waiting for Dave to jump on. So, yeah, cloud-based from scratch, and all written in the UK by our development team in our offices in Stafford. It's going to be multi-channel. So actually, it's not going to be based on the premise that you've got a housing officer sitting at a desk in an office. Okay, there are many different channels that you're going to be able to work with. So do you know what? Yeah, SMS. If you want to do SMS, that's not particularly revolutionary, but how do other people do it? How do Starling communicate with their customers? How do Just Eat communicate with their customers? They use an offline chat. They use a sort of delayed chat. They use a live chat. All of these things can be built into the system based on how we work and how we want to work. And that's how we've built the platform. That's what we've built the core of the platform for. We're going to be working with today's issues. We're going to be working with a very modern system that's constantly evolving. So where we have new issues that come on board, like disrepair claims, like building safety managers, like COVID-19, we're going to be keeping the system very modern and very up to date with today's issues. And you'll see a little bit later on how we're going to manage that, and how we're going to make sure that we do that. Okay. Also, it's built for mobile first. Okay, so yes, absolutely. You're always going to have staff that are going to work in the office. Absolutely, you're going to have a core admin staff that are going to work, be it your rent team or they're going to work at a PC at the very least. However, if we build the system for mobile first and then make sure that it's available for all the other platforms as well, that's how we've built our other software, and that's how we've made it work really well, because that's what it's for. If you design a screen to work well on a mobile, it'll work well on a desktop as well. Okay, and that's how we've built that. Next up, open integration. We'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we're going to have completely open integration. So all the APIs will be publicly available, perfectly secure with tokens, of course. But if you as a customer want somebody to integrate to us, we will facilitate that integration. Absolutely. Next up, releases every 8 weeks. So we upgrade your system every 8 weeks with the latest release. Okay, that seems very frequent, but that's the power of cloud. That's the power of cloud software. Okay, and we're going to be working with our customers to see those releases and make sure that they get the best out of those releases. So our release notes, our regular communications with our account team, we're going to make sure that those releases are fully functional and fully tested and available for you in your live environment. Okay, we'll be doing those upgrades. There's no need for you to worry. Everything's on our cloud platform and everything's done for you. Okay. Next up, Tesco, know your strengths. So going back to our Tesco metaphor earlier, we're talking about Tesco's. Let me tell you, people, I am not an expert in damp sensors. I am not an expert in Internet of Things. Okay. You will never find me straying into areas that I'm not an expert on. Okay, we know what we're going to be good at. This is going to be a system that is great at running your core business. It's going to be a system that is great at running your core repairs and all the rest. But do you know what? If you want Internet of Things stuff, there are plenty of providers out there. We've seen some today and yesterday that will work with you. My job as your HMS provider will be to make sure we integrate really strongly with them. And some of that's not just about APIs. Some of that's about working with organizations to make sure that we've got the fields and the facilities that they need. Okay, so we'll be constantly evolving in steps as well, because actually things change far faster than housing management systems tend to change at the minute. So by having a release every 8 weeks, we can evolve in very small steps very quickly. Okay, if I wait and build it all up and build it all and build it all up to a big release, then that's not going to work very well, because we're going to be behind the times. We need to be reacting to what's going on in the market and see what's coming up and be proactive to pick that up. Okay, so that'll be what will be in our regular releases, those constant little evolutionary steps. And we're going to call it like a perfect core. We're going to have it like a perfect core system, because we're going to do what the core should do well, and we're going to let you have integration to anything you want to do, any of the extra stuff that you want to do that's important for your business. Okay, and it's going to be built with HAs. So we're going to work with partners to finish the build. Okay. We've done the core, we're ready to finish the build, and we're going to work with partners to finish that build. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Next up, I want to talk about our values, and this is what's going to make us different. This is what's going to make us different to some of the other housing management systems out there. You all right, Dave? Am I in trouble?
You've got a few minutes left, Simon.
That's all right. I'm very near the end. I'm very near the end.
Yeah, because I tell you what, there's loads of questions coming your way.
Excellent. I will speed up. It's not like me to go over at all. Thank you for the prompt.
No, you're good. You're good.
This is the important bit, so let's crack on with this. No modules, very important. If you've got the system, you've got every module on my system. there is nothing that you can buy as a module. It's all there, whether you use it or not. Okay, that means that I can't sell you anything. Okay, I have no vested interest in selling you something against somebody else. So no barriers to entry. We're going to have a marketplace where we have existing other suppliers that can bolt on with us automatically. Once we verify their integration, they'll join our marketplace free of charge. So if you're another supplier, I want to talk to you about joining our marketplace. Okay. Next up, publish pricing. This is interesting. We're going to publish our pricing in advance on our website. It's going to be a cost per property per year, and that'll be it. That'll be it. There's no upfront revenue. There's no upfront capital cost. It'll be an annual recurring revenue, and it'll be based on property. So you can see exactly what it's going to cost you. It'll be well under your ODU limits for most people, and on average, it'll be less than it'll be 2/3 less than your current annual maintenance, based on some of the examples we've seen. Online demos available. Let me just make sure that there is nothing, because I'm now running out of time and Dave's going to tell me off. So yeah, let's jump straight to the questions. If Dave tells me there's loads of questions, so
there is. I think you've set the world on fire there, Simon.
That's delightful. I'm very pleased to hear it.
Yeah, I like the way you did that. I'm taking it as an exclusive.
You take that as an exclusive, no problem.
Yeah, listen. So Helen Lomas from Platform has asked the question. Hello, Helen. She says, do you think the customization capabilities of the housing management systems hinders the suppliers in making a decent set of APIs available?
I think my problem with it is primarily at the minute, there isn't, for a lot of them, there isn't even a core set of APIs, because do you know what? Yeah. Yes, there's a lot of customizability, but do you know what? Log a job, get property information, validate the customer. All of these things should be dead simple, dead simple. And if there was a standard suite, the third party alternative providers of the world would work with them. So I think you can get the basics right first, but I think there are potential issues there in terms of customization. Yeah. But I'll give you, for instance, I have a standard set of APIs for one of the core providers now that works very well. You know, it is possible, absolutely possible.
Okay. Paul Aitken from South Lakes Housing asks, do you think housing management system providers struggle to develop the right solution because every customer wants something slightly different? Shouldn't housing associations do things more standard, same? A big one, that, Paul.
I mean, I've worked with a lot of housing associations, much like yourself, Dave, and I would say, yeah, there's a lot of variations there in terms of your approach, but I don't think housing associations are quite as unique and snowflake as they would like to make out, if I'm honest. You know, when you got to log a job, you got to log a job, and I think a lot of it's about having a good core. So everyone raises a debit, everyone has repairs to do, and actually, I think if you can then have a selection of other providers, because do you know what? You know, that rent system, that arrears system, that, you know, that Internet of Things system, if you can pick from a marketplace of what suits you, I think that would work well.
Yeah, I agree. I think just to feed back on that one, Simon, is the issue is we're a heavily regulated sector. You know, there's things we have to do, but that doesn't stop housing associations being creative, using different ways of doing things, being innovative, creative. But there is a core and a non-core of things that need to be done, as you say, which takes me to Aidan's question here. What do you regard as core and non-core?
I mean, for me, the core of a housing management system are the basics of what you need to do. So, you know, people, properties, tenancies, jobs, applications, things like that. However, you know, if you want to run your entire business on a system, if you have a core system, it should run your entire business.
Yeah.
The extra bits are the bits where you want to do something new and unconventional, like IoT, like chatbots, like, you know, all these things that actually you don't have to do to run your business, but actually they improve customer service or efficiency or whatever. So I would say you should be able to run your business on a core system, and actually the extra bits or the alternative provider bits are, you know, about making those extra savings or giving those extra levels of service.
I'm going to be slightly controversial here. I think there's a slight trend moving away from core and non-core. I know of some people, and they've been on this conference, I won't name them, that are deliberately looking to distribute the architecture into best of breed systems, a series of architectures. And you think of your core layers of core housing system, and then you've got the different ones that plug in and above that, whether it's integration to telephony systems or different asset management solutions. The big one being finance systems. Um, so I don't know. We might be at just a slight pivot point, but the issue might be is that I agree with you. I don't think there needs to be a definition of core or non-core for a standard. So I'd come back at Paul Aitken and just say that one. I know Paul well, obviously, and we can talk about that till the cows come home. So the next question was, now you've kind of answered this question with your surprise announcement, and it's from me. Before you said that you have a housing management system, I asked the question, so we have the rise of the giants, as you said. That's a quote, Simon. We had the rise of the giants, but we all know there are giant slayers out there. Where is the Jack of the social housing tech sector? So is that you? I didn't. That was. And if everyone's thinking you prepped that, I had no idea you were going to announce that, Simon.
I love it.
Not a single idea. So I suppose you're the giant killer then.
I'd like to think so. I mean, I'd like to think so. Like I would say though, I'm not presupposing for 1 minute that every single customer out there hates their system and hates their provider. This won't suit everybody. No, what I want is this to be an option, and I want this to try and set some trends in terms of interaction and maybe drive prices down a wee bit as well. I think prices are a wee bit crazy at the minute as well.
Yeah. So well, listen, I'm going to jump into some other questions that kind of link to that as well, Simon. If you don't mind, I'm going to. One of them was, so how do again? This might have been asked. Yeah, this is an interesting one. How do we think a new system would rival existing suppliers others have tried and failed?
I'm just looking at the question. That's anonymous as well.
I know.
Absolutely, others have tried and failed. Absolutely. I mean, let me tell you, I've invested to date around about £500,000 into this project. So this is something that I've got a lot of belief in.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of interest from a lot of organisations I've been talking to.
Good. Good.
It's going to be. I mean, it has a lot of experience behind it in terms of housing and finance. Not just myself, because I know people would think I would put myself on that pedestal as a shy and retiring gent. But yeah, I mean, you'll be surprised as the announcements come out over the next few months as to who's involved, what's been going on, and how much is actually, sort of how functional things are going to be. So I would say watch this space. I think your question is fair, but I would say watch this space.
I've got a really difficult question for you. This is really putting you on the spot here, Simon, but it's a good question because you'll get asked this when you're trying to sell it. And Scott, who works with us and he's got his own business, is a fresh HMS sounds great, and I agree with that. Oh God, it's moved. There's another question coming. But will customers be nervous about Rubixx's stability as a relatively small provider? So
Scott's absolutely right.
Yeah, that is a really good question.
The number one thing we get when we're selling.
Yeah.
And I've had conversation with providers going, well, do you know what, I would buy it if it was because if it's a bolt onto a system, they say, oh, I would buy it if I was buying it from the main provider. Let me tell you, times are changing, folks. If you look at your main providers and the trend graphs of where they are relying on their annual recurring revenue, and that graph is not going in an upwards direction. Their customer numbers, some of their customer numbers are going down, some of their and we've seen big providers go down and then get bought up and then get absorbed, and that's happening. There is movement in the market now, and there is space for a system like this. I think you're absolutely right in terms of stability. We're a stable company. We owe no money to anyone. We have plenty of cash in the bank and all the rest of it. However, he's absolutely right, and it's the number one thing that we get. And I mean, this is where do you start? Somebody's got to start. Somebody's got to be that Jack and say the giant, and we've got to give it a crack.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a few people been at the Uncon. They might be on right now. I can't see the screen when I'm talking to you. The floor. We have people from Civica, etc., that are looking at this. So, to me, it's all open, fair competition. Nobody's really nasty in this sector to any degree.
No, absolutely.
We're all trying to do the right thing. In my keynote earlier about the tenants and such. So good on you, Simon. Why do you think the big software vendors are not interested in the issue of sell, fail, promise, keep, sell?
Why do they not address the issue? Because we allow them to continue, and financially it's great. If you're getting 15-20% of your annual revenue for stuff that was never even real and never invented, and that's true in some customer sites, who's going to say no if the customers lie back and let it happen?
Absolutely. I'll try and get through these. We've got another 5 minutes. How will your solution cost compared to the cost of the normal housing software? I know that's a very difficult and awkward one to answer online.
It's not as awkward as you would think. I actually planned on originally putting the prices on the screen when I was doing it, and they sort of went on and off, on and off. We have provisional pricing at the minute, but on average, when we've looked at various sizes, because we scale it, so it's a cost per asset per year.
Yeah.
It scales obviously the larger it is, the smaller the cost for the higher end stuff.
Yeah.
And it will on average bring you in around about 25 to 35% of your current annual maintenance bill. So effectively, the cost of change will be a saving rather than a cost in terms of that, excluding professional services.
Good stuff. Well, I'm sure we're all looking forward to hearing more about all of that. Do you see yourself challenging the trend, if that's what you can call it, of Dynamics over the traditional housing management system?
I have, and anybody's not seen it, I have a video on my YouTube about the Emperor's New Clothes, and how Dynamics is a wee bit like the Emperor's New Clothes, and I'll link it in the chat later.
Yeah, can you link it up for that?
Yeah, I'll link it in the chat later, because do you know what? I'm not going to tell you that Dynamics is bad. I put Dynamics into a business. I've done some integration on Dynamics. It's not a bad system. I'm going to question how much value that brings in and of itself that you couldn't have done without Dynamics. Do you know? Yeah. I think there is a place for it, and there are some organizations that are right for it, but I think it is absolutely, for a lot of people, an answer to a question that was never asked.
Yeah, there is a trend, there is a movement anyway that's happening with people looking at it, and I think that's a great thing that people look at Dynamics as an option. I think it's a bit unlike, Simon, whether it was a trend or not, but some of the bigger landlords some years ago tried SAP, SAP, they tried JD Edwards, one tried that, and they tried Oracle and so on. All of them, I know, spent millions for it not really to be truly that effective. They don't get talked about so much anymore. But then come along the open systems, and then comes the Dynamics option, which is great. And as you say earlier, you've got all these big mergers going on now, or acquisitions from MRI, and then there's lots happening at the moment. So it's an exciting time, and best of luck to you. Christian Bryan has asked, and I thought of asking the same question here, because we see a lot of issues on this one. Is releasing every 8 weeks too much changes for a typical HA?
A lot of these changes will be switchable, and a lot of them will be very small. So it's to do with small increments of change on a more regular basis. So actually, over a year, I'll probably release the same as other HMS providers. However, I'll do it more frequently. I'll do it in smaller chunks. So actually, it's possibly easier for them than the big upgrade path of some of their existing systems. But I get what you're saying, Christian. Absolutely, there is a risk to that, and that's why we have to be careful. We're going to be working with, the slide I didn't get to was, we're going to be working with consultants, with other sales, other software vendors, from the alternative market, and we're going to be working with housing association partners to build the last of it, to make sure we get that part of it right. And when we do releases, we'll be working with that existing forum in order to make sure that's manageable for them.
Yeah, Scott's made a comment more than a question, which is good. Thanks, Scott, for on some of the things we've talked about. You can see that, Simon. Don't forget, I don't know if everyone knows this, but what's happening at places for people is they're putting in Salesforce over CX platform. So that's an interesting move as well, and I'm sure it'll be a big challenge, but I hope that works, because that would show a different thinking set for some of the bigger landlords in deploying these solutions. Now, what's that? Gary Haldane, does the solution have inbuilt dashboards and reporting?
Well, interestingly, Gary, one of the things that we're very good at is dashboarding and reporting. We have a data warehouse solution. So it has a lot of inbuilt stuff, but also has a lot of APIs to allow you to feed your own warehouses internally. One of the trends that we're seeing a lot more of is people that want data in some other form as well. So it has both, is how it works.
Okay, the one at the top there I'll ask before the next one is, they keep popping in, Simon. You're never going to escape. I asked this, it didn't mean it to come up as anonymous. I asked, you were talking about fully integrated systems, and I must admit, I don't like it now when I see a tender or something like that says we're looking for a fully integrated housing management system. That's like asking for a Rolls Royce with a bloody Vauxhall Cavalier engine in it. It doesn't make sense. Because that's why I asked the question: is there really anything anything at all that is fully integrated.
I think that's the problem. I think with HMSs now, you want the, you know, and I keep using Switchy because I just love the guys at Switchy so much, but
Yeah,
you know, you keep using the Switchy example. You want an HMS, but actually you want the Switchies of the world involved as well. You know, you're not going
yeah,
to get everything in one box anyway. You know, it's having that back and forward. And actually, I'd rather work with the Switchies and say, right, guys, do you need extra fields? Do you need some tables to help? You know, with, I don't know, damp history tables or whatever. I'd rather
yeah,
work with a bunch of, you know, IoT providers. Say, right, what can we do that's generic to you all that will help you integrate well into our systems to enable
yeah,
people to buy your system? You know, because there's no
yeah, and
commercial benefit for me. I don't sell that, and I don't sell
yeah,
modules, so it's going to be, you know, it's a free
yeah.
marketplace.
It's funny you mentioned Switchy, because I know Switchy well, and I like companies like Switchy because they're willing to not just do it differently, but think differently, turn things on their head,
Yeah,
and give folk options. And it's options. I love options, because options allow you to be more creative. If you've just always got the same old, years ago, we all know it was Capita, Civica, Northgate,
yeah,
Arion, and so on, and all the others. And there are other good housing management systems out there. And I believe there's now a new one on the block.
yeah. It's going to be great.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I didn't want to upset anyone. Your MISEs, you know, and so on, and Castletons. But oh god, I could keep going. See, that's the point. There's so many of them now. Somebody has asked, what is it built on?
well, it's better. So it's on our cloud. It's SQL backend to answer the next question. C#.NET front end. I'm getting to the point where I'm seeing words and I don't really understand what they mean, but that's why I have a
Yeah,
director of software development, and a whole team of developers who are far cleverer than I. So
yeah.
I just sort of sit and you know, come up with these
Take it all
great
in.
ideas,
Yeah.
and they just sort of sit with their head in their hands doing this. So yeah,
I heard somebody once say, the answer to that one, Simon, was, "What's it built on?" And they answered, "Blood, sweat, and
yeah,
tears."
absolutely,
That's
absolutely,
it.
and
Yeah.
sheer frustration at other people, I think, as well.
So I think you just answered what's the back end database
Absolutely, yeah.
technology. Yeah, SQL. Jane has nicely said, "Thank you, Simon." AWS, Google, Azure. Somebody
Azure,
has.
in answer to your current question, Azure.
Is that us then? I wonder if I'm hungry. Simon, that was fantastic. Great bit of news. If you're okay with that, I've put a few teasers out on the internet about there's new things on the block. People, tell the world we want competition out there. We want healthy competition. We want to think differently. This is what the Uncon's about. Simon, brilliant. Thank you. Everyone have lunch and we'll be back soon enough. Cheers, guys.